Christy, how's it going? I know we were talking about some philosophy and stuff back the behind the scenes there for a little bit. I think we kind of struck on some common ground there.
Yeah, I feel like they paired us up because of the obvious jokes. Like for that podcast audience that's jogging through the park or is in the gym or whatever else, if you close your eyes and like just picture what an atheist is supposed to look like stereotypically, you got one of us. Now make that person a little bit more queer, and you got the rest of us. Like we're very much in that loop, but. Philosophically, as a therapist myself, I'm an LPC here in Austin. And so my philosophy is always kind of rooted in how to be a better human, how to be happier and healthier, and how to perhaps avoid anxiety or decrease depression and increase contentment and all of these kinds of things. So it's very directed. And so we were just kind of contrasting that with the more philosophical or the more like maybe logic-based types of philosophy, and I guess just trying to maintain that dynamic tension, because they both have a lot of value and they're obviously connected to one another. But if you lose sight of like what do we actually do with this information, I feel like it starts to lose some of its utility.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we hit. Was I love philosophy in a sense, but I push back in a lot of aspects of like what strength certain arguments have. I'm not really high on the aspect that we can come to certain cosmological or metaphysical truths just by simply sitting in the armchair and thinking about it.
Sure.
I think you actually need experience of the world in that way. And so I know a lot of people in the philosophy realm are probably cringing to hear me say this, but I totally lean empiricist. I grant what you call, for those that don't know, a priori knowledge, which is like deductive inference rules, math, basically just things that we don't have. You don't necessarily need experience of the world. But I never really understood how someone could think that has as much metaphysical weight while it brings in more baggage, especially what you call ontologically, which is, the nature of things, right? So now you're answering something with more baggage that you don't have experience of in the world. And those kinds of things, for me, it has value in some sense. But at the same time, it's what can you repeat? What can you verify? Because for what I care about, at least in terms of that, is what we do in the lab. It seems to get more answers. And we can combine that with deduction and all those types of things. But I think, we kind of hit a common ground there, was that, there's utility. It's good to understand your moral framework and things like that, but at the same time, it's not probably the best idea to be as pedantic and lose either your audience in a debate quickly, or just go on about something where people don't have any idea what you're talking about. So I think the plain language and things like that help out way more than I think some people who are in that realm would let on to be.
Yeah, and there is value in consistently and constantly dividing these things into smaller and smaller ideas, and wanting to like really operationally define all of your terms and make sure that these conversations are rooted in like a sophisticated understanding of everything that we're discussing. I appreciate that sort of laboratory philosophy, but we also need to be able to do something with it, and we need to recognize that like shows like this are not necessarily about proving or disproving the existence of God in any kind of meaningful way. I see all these TV commercials for like finding Bigfoot at 7 o'clock. See the latest. And I'm like, if anybody fucking found Bigfoot,
show's over.
You're not going to find out about it at 7 o'clock by watching some like third-tier cable show. Like I recognize that the conversations that we're having here in many ways have been had before, but what we're looking to do more so than to like proof our syllogisms or whatever else is to help people understand some of these concepts, and then hopefully be able to use that in a voting booth, be able to use that in their relationships and their home life and all of these kinds of things. It's valuable to be able to understand that high-minded stuff, but it's also important to be able to just live your life as a human being and not every human being has the opportunity to memorize great French philosophy or whatever else.
Yeah. Or a lot of it's hard to read through, like Kant or Hume. You know, you like with Hume, you got just so many semicolons and commas that it's like, dude, what is like, you need, no, I'm not, I cannot decipher through half this sometimes, but, you know, it's like, it's all valuable. It's good, but it does take work. And I think that's the thing that I do love about philosophy and people that get into it is you really do have to put in the work and really understand the concepts and there's nothing, you know, nothing wrong with that in any way. But I would add, if someone can assert, say, some cosmological argument, say the Kalam, or some modal ontological argument, or whatever it might be that they're using, it seems that I can keep the same variables in a lot of the cases and just plug in some other thing. I know some people use, you know, like pantheism, naturalistic pantheism. You take away some of the properties and you have a more simpler answer that has a wider explanatory scope. I could substitute it just simply for naturalism, but I wouldn't do that, right? I wouldn't just go, here's my a priori assessment or my deductive assessment on why naturalism is true. I would show the empirical basis of why I think it's the case, because, you know, we start at a level of really no knowledge and we have to work there. Whereas I think a lot of people start from this kind of top down approach of, I have all the knowledge, or let me start with the God and work my way back down. You can justify anything that way. It's not hard to. So
I mean, it's so psychologically expensive to give up a belief in God. You know, you are losing your access to seeing your dead loved ones. You're losing your access to eternal life. You're losing your access to a perfect plan for your life. And now all of a sudden you have to make decisions based on the fact that your decisions kind of don't matter. Like whatever meaning they have, you have to give to them. It's really expensive, and it makes sense that people want to cling on to these beliefs and that they are willing to really twist themselves into knots to find ways to justify it and validate it. And you can do some interesting things with that and develop some very interesting thoughts. And, you know, that's kind of what philosophy is in a lot of ways. But ultimately, you have to kind of ask yourself why. You know, what is the value in that? If there truly was a perfect, all-knowing, all-powerful, loving, and authoritative God that wanted to be a part of our lives and help run the show here on earth, whether that's a Christian God or whatever else, why would we need to sit down and draw out these like elaborate syllogisms to prove it? Like, why would we use this completely different form of reasoning than what we apply in our daily lives? And if that God wanted to have a relationship with us, why wouldn't we have a relationship that isn't based on these like very strange sort of either mystical or overly intellectual types of connections?
Yeah, it's like, why does it get to kind of sidestep the rigorous evaluation of things that we actually prove and know, right? Like why is it that my framework gets to go through these really, you know, rigorous criterions of verification, falsification, peer review, and then someone gets to sidestep it by, well, I'll just kind of think about it. And I don't want to downplay a lot of the arguments because they're great, but a lot of cases it's, you know, that's why I weigh on that side of how I gain knowledge. But I guess before we take a call, I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the kind of the psychological state of people, the cost that they have to kind of give up as a therapist. I'm sure you kind of have would you say you have a better understanding of that now, of why that's the case? It's not really a universal thing, I would assume. It's probably different in a lot of cases, but could you kind of elucidate on that?
Yeah, I mean, exploring and understanding psychology and becoming a psychotherapist myself was definitely integral to my losing religion or leaving religion behind, because you start to recognize all of the little tricks and all of the little ways that we sort of distract ourselves or force religion to work. And not only that, I've said before on this show that kind of the phenomenology of understanding hypnosis and some of these like different aspects of just the way our brains work and the ways that they can be manipulated and tricked, that to me was the final straw that made me go from, okay, I don't understand how Jesus could be real, but like I'm supposed to, and I don't know how to make that work, and how do I make it fit, and just trying really hard to make that puzzle come together.
Yeah.
Well, once I began to understand just the way that human brains operate and the way that we take in information and the inherently flawed nature of that, there just felt like there was no reason to explore those things anymore. And so, in going through that process, I've begun to understand a lot more about religious trauma and the particular ways that religion can hurt folks. Some of those things may seem really obvious, and to some people they are, but there are other ideas that are much more, I don't know, insidious or kind of hidden. Like, just because you come to a conclusion and decide that, okay, there never was a God, and so there never was a Jesus, and so therefore I don't need to feel guilty about masturbation or whatever other little hangups we have, it doesn't mean that you just like automatically flip a switch and delete all of those old assumptions. And so many of them hound us for our entire lives, really. And so working to be a part of that solution really kind of, I don't know, radicalized me, I suppose, in wanting to change this world.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you kind of get that. I can imagine why it would radicalize you in that way. 100%. That's definitely something. Let me put it this way. I feel like you and Shannon Q in a show would be just so kick ass.
Yeah.
That
I think I actually hosted Shannon on my show before she had done any other ACA stuff. So I
awesome.
think I don't know if she would say this, but I think I can take credit for maybe introducing Shannon Q to the ACA multiverse of things. So
I love I would say I love things in neuroscience and psychology. Cannot speak on the subjects to save my life. But yeah, that would be you guys would be the people I'd be taking some notes from. That's for sure. Do you want to go ahead and I think we have a caller. Do you want to get to our first call?
Yeah, absolutely.